this border war. Fans called it Moonshine Throwdown. I think that's the best rivalry name, an unofficial name, but the best rivalry name I've come across.
Yeah, unofficial that should become official soon enough.
Embrace it.
5 receivers at Duncan's disposal. Duncan stepping up. Hit! Ball is loose!
Big ball here.
Marshall thinks they have it. And the Horde do!
Here's the kickoff from Amaretto Curry to the Hilltoppers, and we are underway. And a fake reverse on the kick return. And here comes Townsend down the left sideline. What a way to start it for Western Kentucky on the road. And it is an opening touchdown return. And just like that, the Hilltoppers strike first.
Justin Rohrwasser to try to win it for Marshall from 53 yards out. It's got the leg. It is good! And the perfect season continues for Justin Rohrwasser.
Goes for 2. Going for the win. Western Kentucky going for the victory. Rolling to his right. Quick strike. And they did it! Western Kentucky has ended the perfect season into the hands of Willie McNeil. A shocker here in West Virginia. And it is over for Marshall. They end the regular season 11-1.
Welcome back to the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. Again, continuing the position group breakdown series. I got Steven back with me, and we're going to tackle that Western Kentucky defensive line and linebacking core. One real strength, one solid unit, the defensive line for sure. A little bit, a few more question marks, let's say, as far as linebackers go, but still should be a pretty productive unit nonetheless. A lot of change in the linebackers, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But for right now, we're going to start with defensive line. Phil still ranks this unit number one in Conference USA, not tied with anybody, all out number 1 in the conference. And to make it even more special, nationally ranked 24th. I haven't looked too closely, but I'm willing to say that's probably the highest nationally ranked unit of either team, Western Kentucky or Marshall. That's pretty high up there when you start talking about national rankings. Number 24. Total on the roster, defensive linemen. Now, this is defensive ends and defensive tackles. 18. And pretty fair division, 9-9 each. Portal out and portal in. A fair amount of production out. Really, most of it lies with one guy. Defensive lineman Ricky Barber out, went to UCF. Defensive end also out, Stephone Atkinson. Portal in, trio of guys. Michael Allen, defensive tackle from Wake Forest. Michael Pitts coming over from Cincinnati. And Nico Cooper, that played linebacker at Nebraska, listed along the defensive line for Western Kentucky. I think. Maybe I got that backwards. I don't know. One way or the other. He either came in as a linebacker and playing defensive line or came in as defensive lineman playing linebacker. One of the two. Bookends, Steven. Bookends. Best duo in the league, in my opinion, and amongst the best in college football when you're talking about D'Angelo Malone and Jawan Jones, and one of the top defensive linemen, interior defensive linemen in the conference, bar none, and Jeremy Darvin. Before we get into these individual guys, when we start talking about projected starters and stats and accolades and all that good stuff, let's talk about a real strength, if not the biggest strength for Western Kentucky, and one that's been a strength for a number of years now.
Yeah, I mean, when you have a guy like D'Angelo Malone that was a draft prospect last year, and he just kind of shocked everybody in the conference. He was Defensive Player of the Year 2 years ago. Didn't have, I don't want to say a subpar season last year, but didn't have his standard of a season last year that he expected to have. Opted to come back, got some reviews on what he could do to improve his stock. And a lot of that was really improving his body and improving his consistency. And not just being like a specialty speed rusher kind of guy. They want him to be on the field every down, disrupting plays all the time. So his offseason focus was putting muscle on his body. And, from everything you've heard and, seeing him even in media availability, he's bulked up. He's put more weight on. And you just have to expect that guy's going to be a even bigger force. Then you have Jawan Jones, who's really been just kind of that model of consistency at Western. Feels like he's been here forever now. He was a freshman All-American when he was a freshman. Has been an academic All-American all 4 years. I speak to his dad every once in a while. We just check in with each other, and just that's the type of guy you want in your program. He's just a good, upstanding citizen and representative of the university, does everything the right way. He's a hard worker. He shows his leadership by his actions. And then you got Jeremy Darvin, who I've been raving about him for years. I still remember when he committed from the Nashville area. Big time commit at the time, and he's just been productive. He's just been that guy he's always there. He just plays. He shows up, he makes plays. And, the unit being highly ranked is deserved because you have a lot of production back. There's not a lot of question marks there. You kind of know what to expect with the guys that are going to be on the field. So you have to feel really good about the unit. Should be really strong. It should cause a lot of chaos and havoc for Conference USA offenses trying to game plan to keep them out of the backfield.
Yeah, it says a lot about the unit being ranked number 1 anyway, despite losing defensive lineman Ricky Barber to the portal, because he was a productive member of the line. And for 3 of the 4 main dudes to come back and still be ranked number 1, it says a lot about the unit. And there is a fair amount of depth there. There are some guys that will be thrust into action more so than in years past and be asked to step up, just like with every position group that we talk about. There's always it seems like it's always time for somebody to step up, and this is no different. No matter how good your unit is, you're one snap away from being in a little bit of peril. So guys have to continue to develop, have to continue to get better. But when we talk about D'Angelo Malone, I mean, what more can you say about the guy? He could have left last year and tested those NFL waters and probably been a late round draft pick, a developmental guy, but chose to come back and hone his game one more year. When you talk about some of the best that have ever come through the program, he's got to be one of the best that's on that list. Got to be. Offense, defense, doesn't matter. He's got to be on that list. The list of accolades on his bio on WKU Sports is unreal. I couldn't list them all, so what I did was just counted how many there were. And you can go look at this if you want, folks. Go look at it, WKUsports.com, whatever, and bring up his bio. 32 individual accolades before you even start talking about what happened in 2020 and 2019. Like those bold accolades. Such and such watch list, such and such this, all conference, 32 different accolades. Also for D'Angelo Malone, he's listed as Phil Steele's number 4 draft eligible, not defensive end, linebacker. So that tells you what Phil sees his game potentially translating. And if you look at it, it's not a bad thought. It looks like a guy that could really thrive in a 3-4 system where you're playing an outside linebacker. You get to rush the quarterback. He's got movement. He's got moves. We've seen him run down the field and make tackles from behind. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. As a matter of fact, I think he would do quite well playing in a a 3-4 system where he has the flexibility to get down in a 3-point stance or can play from standing up. But Malone, the 6'4", 240-pound senior last year, amazing. You're right, down from the year before and as far as sacks go, but still 71 tackles, 42 solo from a defensive end position, 11 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, and 2 forced fumbles. 2021 preseason Conference USA Defensive Player of the Year. You mentioned it, the 2019 Defensive Player of the Year, and a first-team All-Conference USA performer in both 2019 and 2020. I mean, what else is there left to do really other than win that team championship? He's done it all individually. Now it's time to put it together and see if they can get it done in 2021 on a team level. You mentioned Jawan Jones, 6'3", 275-pound redshirt junior, 38 tackles, 12 of those solo, 5 tackles for loss, and 2 sacks last year. in my opinion, Jawan Jones, one of the most underrated players in the entire conference. And I will bang that drum until people start listening. If he plays on another line opposite a different defensive end that's not as gaining all the star power as Malone, he's a first-team all-conference player in his own right. You know, if he's the guy that's the marquee guy on a different line, or maybe next year if he comes back and Malone is gone, he will be the marquee player. But it's unfortunate that he gets overshadowed by D'Angelo and how good he is, because a lot of those opportunities that Malone get are because Jones is on the other side. So he gets it done on the field, and more importantly, he gets it done off the field. 2020 Conference USA All-Academic Team, 2020-2021 Co-SIDA First Team Academic All-American. How about that? Getting it done in the classroom and getting it done on the field. Best bookends in the conference. Now, Steve, we're going to talk about a few more defensive ends before we transition into the defensive tackles. We're going to talk about these transfers that come in. Michael Pitts listed on defensive, listed as a defensive lineman on the WKU Sports roster. 6'3", 230-pound grad transfer. 38 games, 22 of those starts for Cincinnati. Gosh, I got something stuck in my throat. You got to bear with me. 77 tackles, 37 solo, 17.5 tackles for loss, and 9.5 sacks across that career. And Jaden Hunter, a 6'2", 240-pound redshirt junior, 15 tackles, 10 of those solo, 2.5 tackles for loss in 12 games in 2020. At CJ Maria, the 6'4", 255-pound redshirt senior, 3 tackles, half a tackle for loss in 6 games for the Tops in 2020. Steve, what about some of these other guys? Who do you like to kind of make a little bit of a leap here in relief duty from the defensive end position? I've got 3 more that we're going to talk about before we get done with the defensive ends. But of those guys I just listed, who do you think is most poised to make a leap?
Well, kind of continuing a theme from our last episode's wide receivers, those P5 transfers, man. I mean, when you got Michael Pitts, when you got Jaden Hunter, who I believe came over from Georgia, I mean, we've got some guys who were heralded stars in their own right before they came to Western. For whatever reason, their situation changed. They decided to come to Western. This is Jaden Hunter's second year in the program, so he's getting some familiarity with the schematics. He's just playing behind some guys that have taken a lot of reps wearing the chrome domes. So I'm really excited about both of those guys. And then there's even some other freshmen that we've signed that, they haven't played yet. Then you got guys like Lycan Terrell that's been on campus for a few years. That really excited about him. And Darius Ship Jr. Coming over from JUCO, which was kind of that Ricky Barber replacement. When you lose him, he was a freshman, Writers All-American, then decided to follow his coach down to UCF. You can't fault him for that. He had a great year, a lot of potential there with him, but he decided to leave. And then sometimes you plug those holes with the JUCO guys, and I think, you don't exactly know what to expect with a JUCO guy, but he has experience. He has kind of the conditioning, the body. He's not straight out of high school. He's been playing with some big boys for a couple years, whether you want to call it lower level, whatever. Usually JUCOs relate to more academic side than anything. So if he's good there, he has prototypical size, 6'1", 290. I think we're going to still be in pretty good shape, kind of plugging the holes and then having the depth to rotate some guys out whenever those guys need breathers. So I think we're in pretty good shape there on the defensive line.
Yeah, one name I want to mention from the defensive end position before we get into these defensive tackles a little more heavily is a guy that's now a redshirt freshman at Western Kentucky. And it's a guy that we've talked about before because he committed to Marshall and then transferred over to Western Kentucky, and that's Dante Walker, the 6'2", 290-pound, again, redshirt freshman, highly, highly touted coming out of high school down in Georgia, was expected to be a contributor for the Herd as a freshman. And as a matter of fact, if you go to the 24/7 Sports recruiting page for Marshall and go down to the bottom where it has like the all-time recruits, he's number 10. And then, there was he wasn't involved. He was just wrong place, wrong time. He didn't do anything wrong. He was just a bystander. But whatever the case may be, he and his family decided that Huntington wasn't the place for him. So Western Kentucky gets to reap the rewards of that happening. So this is a guy you should look for to potentially try to break in and make plays that nobody has remembered for the past couple of years. Herd fans, he never got to line up for the Herd. So, if he comes in and he's like gangbusters, they're going to be like, dang, man, can't believe we lost that guy. But anyway, let's talk about these defensive tackles now. I've got a bunch of stats here as well. And of course, we got to start with Jeremy Darvin. We talked about him already, but he's the guy. He's the one in the middle that's going to make it all work as far as defensive linemen go. 6'1", 300-pound redshirt senior, third team All-Conference USA last year, 31 tackles, 17 of those solo, 5 tackles for loss, and 3 sacks in 12 games for the Tops. You mentioned a few of the other guys. Darius Shipp, you mentioned, 6'1", 305. Junior, 13 tackles and 7 solo, 4 tackles for loss, and a sack in 10 games last year for the Tops. Terrell, you mentioned, the 6'1", 290, injured all of 2020. So it'll be nice to see how he bounces back and if he's a healthier, 100% and ready to be a big contributor. Marcus Bragg, big body guy. Good Lord, 6'4", 260. Redshirt junior, 7 tackles and 2 solo in 11 games last year. Looks like he's potentially ready to take on a bigger share of the load. Somebody is 6'4", 260. You'd like to see him take a bigger share of the load and be a big run stuffer up the middle. 80? Oh, well, 280. How about that? Stopping the run even better. Another transfer that we're going to talk about, Mike Allen coming over from Wake Forest, the 6'5", 290-pound redshirt junior. 11 games in 18 and 19 for Wake. 6 tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss, and 1 fumble recovery. Didn't play in 2020, but we'll see if he's also back to 100% and ready to be a contributor for the Tops. And then we're going to talk about a couple of local kids and one big-time signee as far as freshmen go. You love getting those local kids in here. So we'll see, we don't expect much from them right now, but I always like to mention those local kids. Chase Jones, Terrion Thompson, both local Bowling Green kids, one Glasgow, one Bowling Green, on the roster. I think Western does such a great job of recruiting locally and keeping the kids that they can local. It's really a nice niche thing that they do really well. But the one we want to really talk about is David Ndukwe, the 6'6", 300-pounder. Again, if you go to 24/7 Sports and to the recruiting page for Western and go down to the bottom to the all-time, we talked about River Helms from the tight end position being one of those guys that was on that list. Well, so is David Ndukwe. He's number 14 all-time. So Tyson Helton really got something going on here with this recruiting, getting guys that are ranking high on the all-time list. Steve, we've talked about a few of these guys. Defensive tackle position is pretty solid, but with the departure of Barber, there is some room for somebody to make a big leap. And who's the guy you think is going to be the one that makes the biggest leap?
I think there's a lot of good potential there. Ndukwe, Terrion Thompson, Dante Walker that you talked about, Darius Shipp. You might not say a lot of experience in our uniform, and hopefully some of those younger guys get to redshirt. But you got to think like a JUCO guy, like a Darius Shipp or a Mike Allen, that kind of has some experience. You got to think one of those guys is going to come in and kind of be that surprise guy that, you're not expecting to have a big year. But I think we're going to be just fine in those positions just because we do have some depth there, even though there's kind of a youth movement kind of starting to filter in there. But with the redshirt rules as it are, you can play guys 4 games, especially Terrion Thompson, like you mentioned earlier, and David Ndukwe, a couple of just big body guys that if you can get them some college, meaningful snaps, and not count against their eligibility, I think we're going to be fine in the near future. But I think Darius Shipp, I don't want to say plug and play. You're not going to replace Ricky Barber. That guy was surprisingly disruptive last year as a freshman. But you don't necessarily need somebody that's causing that much havoc. You just need somebody that's plugging holes. At the end of the day, the defensive line just needs to not be moved, hold their position, plug holes. And if you're disruptive, that's great. But at the end of the day, plug holes, make tackles. Don't let guys slip through your arms. That's kind of what you want to do. But I think bringing somebody over with some JUCO experience in Darius Ship, I think that's somebody that's a good plug and play. Hopefully brings that experience, that little veteran leadership amongst kind of a room full of some younger guys behind him.
This is a spot where I feel like anybody that has gone through an off-season conditioning program or has been through 1 year in a collegiate strength program versus coming straight out of high school and not really have done that yet. But a guy like Terrell, who has been there, who was banged up last year, but has already been through the strength and conditioning program for a whole year, and now his body is bigger, stronger, versus somebody who's coming straight out of high school. You think a guy like that would have more of an advantage to transition into playing immediately. But you said it, the next Ricky Barber might be on the roster right now. He was disruptive as a freshman, and you got a number of guys that could come in and, do the same kind of thing. So, but this is, like I said, they do by and large a better job now in high school sports for strength and conditioning versus when I was in high school, which was basically a bunch of dudes standing around lifting weights. But, now there's a legitimate program to it, and there's a better understanding of nutrition and the whole, like, off-season workouts versus in-season workouts versus post-season workouts. It's different now, but being able to put that all together in a college level, that's going to give you a definite leg up. So we'll see where they're at. I think the unit is strong anyway, without a doubt. So let's talk about who are you most excited to see from this unit? Defensive end and lineman together. Who's the guy for you?
I feel like I'm taking the easy route out if I go with D'Angelo Malone. But, when a guy that is an NFL draft prospect decides to come back and play another year and wants to improve on his game and wants to make a splash and really cement himself as a higher, second, third round draft pick versus fourth, fifth round draft pick. There's some motivation, there's some chip on his shoulder, there's some want to go get there. And when he's improved his body and his skill already, that it was already there, I'm excited to see what D'Angelo Malone's going to do this year. He has a great body of work already. 23 and a half tackles for loss a couple of years ago, close to leading the nation. A little bit of a down year last year, but still a great year by just normal standards, across college football. Expect him to come in and just really be a wrecking force, in the backfields for all of our opponents.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with taking the easy way out. It's not the easy way out. The guy is a bona fide NFL draft pick. And when you talk about a guy that gets to come back and he's no longer really developing his game more so than honing his game, then how could you not be excited to see that? I mean, you're talking about a guy that could potentially be an early round 2 pick. You know what I mean? Like, if everything goes right, like if you have another season like you had in 2019, and you're putting up all these gaudy numbers, how the heck are you not going to raise some eyebrows? And people be like, all right, well, this could sneak into the back end of the first round, could be a solid second round pick. And, you got to be excited to see that. Nothing wrong with that. These are exciting players. I'm excited to see them. So who's the biggest loss from this unit from a year ago?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely Ricky Barber. I mean, when you see the guy that was the freshman, the Football Writers freshman All-American, just a guy that was very impressive, and we had high hopes for him just after his freshman campaign. and he decided to leave for his own reasons. A coach left. He followed a coach down to UCF. Don't blame him. Don't fault him. Kind of is what it is. The portal giveth, the portal taketh away. But that one's going to be a tough one to replace, and we've talked about some names that might be able to do it, but it's big shoes and a big jersey and a lot of good stats that we're going to have to replace. It's definitely Ricky Barber.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's not much to choose from, but, anytime you lose a starter and, a freshman All-American or what, Football Writers All-American, whatever you said it was, it's big. He put up good numbers and, it was only going to get better, you'd like to think. So we've talked about a number of guys who could potentially have a breakout season at certain positions and whatever. Who you think is going to be the breakout player in 2021?
Well, I think it was Jeremy Darvin last year, so I'm going to go away from Jeremy. Even though I do think very highly of him, I think he's a great player. He's going to be consistent. He's going to be healthy. He's going to play a lot of games. But I would like to see, the guy replacing Ricky, the guy Darius Shipp that's coming in from JUCO. I would kind of like to see him when you've got all that star power around him and Juwan and D'Angelo, Jeremy Darvin. He has a lot of stars around him that are going to be commanding a lot of attention. So, he might be a guy that can just kind of sneak up, has good size, 6'1", 290. Experience from the JUCO level. He's played. He has snaps under his belt, so I don't think he's gonna be gun shy once the lights comes on. I'd like to see him kind of be that surprise player. Sometimes those JUCO guys hit. They're hit or miss. Let him be a hit. I think Darius Shipp could be a guy that surprises and makes a name for himself this coming year.
I like the pick of the position because I really don't know who the guy will be, because we see in football like no other sport, like whoever you put in, like, somebody gets injured and you put a fresh defensive back in the game, who do they throw out immediately? That guy, the guy that just came into the game. So whoever that guy is, that's not Malone, Jones, or Darvin, is going to be who you're going to run at to see if he can stop you. So if it's the first guy the Top's put in there, then that's the guy that's going to have the opportunity to break out in a big way. Because what are you going to do? Run at those other three guys? I mean, we know what'll happen if that's the case. So I don't know who that guy will be. I'm just going to default to your decision, to your name, and say it'll be Shipp, and that's what I'm going to go with as well. But whoever mans that position is the guy that has the best opportunity to break out in 2021. So when it's all said and done, who's the MVP of the unit along the defensive line in 2021?
He's probably going to be MVP of the WKU line. I hope he's the MVP of the Conference USA defensive players. So we're going to go with D'Angelo Malone, the known entity, the havoc causer, and rightfully so. Like you said, I hope he could potentially be setting himself up to be the highest draft pick in Western's history, which I believe right now is Forrest Lamp. I think he was an early third-round selection, just barely slipped out of that second round. So I think D'Angelo Malone could definitely be setting himself up with his body of work already, with his, aimed improvements on his body and his game to get better. I think his goal is to kind of be that best player, and if he does those things and it translates into gameplay, which ultimately leads to his draft position, it's going to be hard to say it's not D'Angelo Malone, and there's no reason to think he's going to fall off when he has a very big carrot in front of him saying, hey, it's time to shine. It's time to go get that paycheck. So I think it's D'Angelo.
Yeah, well, he's going to first of all, you sold Mr. Lamp a little bit short. He's drafted a second round pick number 38. So he was still in the second round. So it's going to be some hard things to do there, but we know how pass rushers are basically like worth their weight in gold as far as the NFL comes. It's a passing league. And if you can stop the pass, then if you can get to the quarterback, then they want you. So a season like we saw in 2019 would definitely put D'Angelo Malone in the running to become the highest drafted Western Kentucky Hilltopper. But I'm with you. It's got to be Mr. 32 accolades on the WKU bio, D'Angelo Malone. And if it all plays out like we think it will play out, you're talking about a guy who is now a 2-time Conference USA Defensive Player of the Year, one of the most productive players in Conference USA history, ranking amongst the national leaders in all the major pass rushing categories. That also, by the way, has the size that you like for an NFL roster. It's got to be D'Angelo Malone. No slight to anybody else, but man, you're playing with if you're playing with a legit NFL prospect, it's nothing against you. It's just he's damn good. Hot take time, Steve. What's the hot take time for the unit in 2021?
Well, I really think these guys can match or probably surpass their sack total from last year. I don't know what that number is, but I know that they were probably on the field too much last year. Just, we've talked about the offense ad nauseum, scoring 19 points per game. So the offense wasn't on the field very much. Defense was on the field a lot, tired. And even as good as the unit was statistically, just looking at yards, points, and stuff they gave up, they were doing that with tired bodies, people that were out on the field too much. So I think if there's fresher legs and you have an offense that's actually putting up some points, like we're projecting with our previous reviews, I think we might see some more statistics put up, just on explosive plays on the defensive side of the ball, which is your takeaways, your sacks, your tackles for loss, stuff like that we like to see that is exciting, those big hits. So I think the unit will surpass and overtake their sack total from last year. I don't know what that number is off the top of my head, but I think collectively those guys are going to be disruptive and get to the quarterback, and we're going to see some sacks.
Looks like 23 was the total for last year, so easily doable. I won't say easily doable, but attainable nonetheless. And I like to call those plays like you're talking about, forced fumbles, quarterback hurries, hits on the quarterback, all that kind of. I like to call those impact plays because they can really just change the complexion of a game in a moment. I mean, even if you just get a lick on the quarterback, but he gets the pass off and it's completed, if the lick's good enough, he may not be, clear-headed for the next couple of plays, which could lead to a turnover or could lead to a drive stalling or any one of those things. So impact plays, you and I were kind of like-minded with that. I think that this unit is poised to have more impact plays. That's where I was going with it as well. I didn't want to just zero in on sacks, but all encompassing, forced fumbles, fumble recoveries, hits on the quarterback, hurries, all that kind of defensive line impact stuff. I think will be up from a year ago, despite the departure of Ricky Barber. So I think the defensive line is solidified as the strength of the unit, at least until we can see how good this offense may be. But as of right now, it's the most known unit on the team. It's the strength of the team right now. So hang with us on the other side of this break. We're going to talk about linebackers. This is where there was a lot of turnover from a year ago. Some big time players are gone and a little bit of portal action in. So hang with us. It's the Moonshine Throwdown Podcast.
Johnston against a 4-man rush. Pressured by Malone. Third sack, Malone. Western Kentucky has knocked off UAB to go to 2-0 in Conference USA. Whew. That's a good player.
Time to talk linebacker episode on a somewhat positive note, I guess. Middle of the road unit for Phil Steele, tied for 6th in the conference with Louisiana Tech and Middle Tennessee. Oh, you love to see that connection if you're a Western Kentucky Hilltopper fan. Total linebackers on the roster at WKU Sports is 10. Fair amount of action in the portal, more out than in, but some big names that folks will recognize. Portal out for the tops: Kyle Bailey, Damon Lowe, Mario Wright. Portal in, Matthew Flint coming over from UNC. Bailey was a big-time contributor. There's no way around it. But I do know that, he was the third leading tackler. I think, wait a minute, maybe it was sack getter on the team. Let me see if the tackler. Let me see what the tackles was. Total tackles, he was, third leading tackler on the team last year. So the loss is big. He had a tendency to, get a little emotional, let's say, during a game and put the Tops in a bad situation after a play or something like that. So you hate to see him go, but maybe, you can get a little bit more level-headed play, keep the Toppers in positive situations this year. Damon Lowe was a guy that contributed as well. So we'll see how that loss really phases this unit. But Steve, what do you think about the linebacker unit? Losing a lot of production, and we don't know what we have with Matthew Flint coming over from UNC. We'll talk about the stats in a minute. But you've mentioned that, this could be a unit that starts 3 Power 5 transfers. But I know that some of these guys we've talked about already are listed as defensive linemen on the roster, but that doesn't mean they won't drop back and play linebacker. What do you think about the linebacking unit here in 2021 before we start talking about individual guys?
Yeah, Kyle Bailey was, a very productive player and somebody that kind of had to step up after, guys that he replaced. But he did miss a few games last year. Didn't dress on senior night, didn't play. Not sure. I don't think he played in the bowl game, if I recall correctly. But there's a guy, Nicholas Days, on the roster who stepped up and kind of just was a pleasant surprise in those few games that he missed. You're like, who? Number 5. Yeah, number 5. Yeah. You're like, who is this number 5 that just keeps hitting every running back that goes up the middle? And you're like, Days. So this guy is pretty good. And then you got Will Ignont Jr., who came over from Tennessee, if I'm not mistaken, the year before last. And if I had to name some man crushes from the spring game, it was it was Adam Cofield, who built like a brick house. And then it was also Will Ignont, who is also built like a brick house. So there's plenty of talent. We've talked about some other guys, Jaden Hunter, that are going to be on that side of the ball. Matthew Flint. Just the linebacker room's okay. There's not a lot of stats and experience per se coming back. So if there's a ranking that's not favorable, in the conference, it's understandable. But, the talent that's in that room and at that position might be the deepest in the conference. It just isn't proven on Houchin Smith Stadium field. So I'm really confident and really comfortable with this group that we're going to have on the field, whomever is starting on game 1.
This is where you're right. The stats are not going to back up what the unit is capable of doing because they're just really not there. But we'll talk about it. You talk about Will Ignont, the redshirt junior, 6'1", 240. The numbers are not going to blow you away. 3 tackles, 2 of those solo in 1 game last year. Nick Days, hey, this is the guy that you're talking about. 6'3", 235-pound redshirt sophomore. Love the build. Love the love the production. 27 tackles, 20 of those solo in 11 games, it says. But is that right? Okay, one says 6 games, the other says 11 games. So I don't know what that is, but whatever. 3. So Steve says 3. Sports Reference says 6, and Phil still says, or somebody else says 11. But good Lord, they're all over the place.
3 starts.
Oh, 3 starts. Okay, well, appeared in 6 games. Let's put it that way. Matthew Flint is the transfer from UNC, 6', 240-pound redshirt sophomore, 4 games over 2 years at UNC, 4 tackles and a half a tackle for loss during that span. And then this is where I've been screwed up. I was talking to Steven about this. We mentioned this in the running back episode. Malik Staples is in the portal, but he's on the roster as a linebacker and not a running. He's in the portal as a running back for Western Kentucky, but he's on the WKU Sports roster as a linebacker. So this has had my mind going in a million directions because I'm like, is there two guys named Malik Staples? But we're going to go with he's still on the roster because he's on the WKU roster, just playing linebacker. 6'1", 230-pound redshirt senior, 9 tackles, 4 solo, 1 tackle for loss in 2020. Now, we talked about Nico Cooper coming over from Nebraska is a guy that could also contribute at linebacker, is a 6'5", 240-pound redshirt sophomore. We don't know if he's going to play defensive line. Could be one of those guys that plays linebacker or defensive line. Also, Jaden Hunter in that mix could play both. Either we just don't know. It's kind of like an open competition right now, Steve. We probably feel like Days and Ignont are penciled in. Let's just go ahead and say that. But there's still room for plenty of guys to rotate in there and get some playing time. It's been a next man up mentality before, and it's worked out. Like you talked about, Kyle Bailey stepped up in a big way last year and just filled the shoes of guys that departed before him. And it could be more of the same this year. So who do you think other than Days and Ignont, Staples, who are the mystery men that are going to fill this out, you think?
Well, I think, Jaden Hunter that we've touched on for Georgia, transfer over, and then Malik Staples. We talked about him in the running back room. He came over from Louisville. If you remember last year, he was a linebacker at Louisville, but he had played running back previously. Came over, he wanted to play running back. Got behind Gage. Didn't see a lot of time. He was like a goal line, like Furby type guy. They were putting him in those type situations. The running back room must have got full. He looked at the portal for his options, and they put him in the linebacker room, which is fine because he has experience there, and he's a big body that's also athletic, can move, can run. Obviously, if you're a running back, you're obviously mobile, hopefully. So I think, when I've said, hey, we might start a lot of P5 guys, when you got a Louisville guy, Tennessee guy, Georgia guy, then you got a UNC guy there, the Nebraska guy there. It's hard not to say there's a lot of talent there. That's not even, talking about Nick Days, who actually played some games and was very productive last year. So I'm excited about all these guys. I think there's a lot of plug and play and a lot of pieces you can rotate in and give people breathers and keep fresh legs in there. So really excited about the linebackers. I know, when you turn over people like that, it is a question mark, but I think in our defensive scheme that we run, I think you have guys that are athletic and can make plays. And I think, whomever that is, Ignont and Days being those main pieces, I think, Hunter right behind them. I think we're going to be fine there. I think we have some very, very good I want to say underrated talent, but guys that are going to come in and be successful at Western Kentucky.
Yeah. A lot of transfer guys, a lot of, this is not a position right now that has starters or, guys at the top of the depth chart, let's say, that were recruited into Western Kentucky straight out of high school. So this is a patchwork unit that's going to have to come together and play at a high level. The defensive line is going to do a lot. They're going to take a lot of the load off of that second level of guys, but still, the guys will get through. The passes will get past the defensive line. So these linebackers are going to have to come together and collectively raise their play and at least try to match what we saw last year. And I'm not saying it's not impossible. It's just one of those things. We don't have a lot of stats to go off of here, but to still be ranked 6th in the conference by field still says something. It says the cupboard is completely not bare at all. As a matter of fact, what the potential there is just have to see it happen. But, given that, who are you most excited to see from the linebacking unit in 2021?
Man crush 23 Will Ignont.
It's going to be a running theme, I guess. Okay, Will Ignont. Let's see it. Trio of guys hit the portal. Who's the biggest loss from last year? I don't know if it was there somebody else that also graduated or something like, or was it just Portal out and that was it? I don't even recall.
I only remember Porter out, but it's definitely Kyle Bailey. Just a very productive guy. Even though he always kind of seemed like an undersized linebacker, he always kind of had that Devin Key size body, but he's always in there finding the ball. So Kyle Bailey is going to be tough to replace. Like you said, he kind of was emotional, kind of got some a lot of late hit, unsportsmanlike type penalties. Missed some games his senior year. Didn't dress on senior night. I'm pretty sure he didn't play in the bowl game for those reasons. So he's still a productive player that you have to replace, but I think we're going to plug some guys in there that can find the ball and make some plays.
Yeah, there's a guy we haven't mentioned that I'm looking down the tackle leaders from last year that didn't hit the portal, I guess, exhausted his eligibility and, moved, I guess, moved on. And that was Eli Brown. That's a guy that's not here from a year ago. Highly productive guy. Number 5 in tackles on the team. So between Bailey and Brown, that's 2 big holes that you got to fill. But yeah, I think you're right. It's Kyle Bailey. He's number 3 tackler, number 3 sack man, on this defense last year. So anytime you lose that kind of production, it's a big loss. Who's poised to be the breakout player? You got a lot of guys you can choose from because nobody's had to break out yet. So who's going to be the guy that breaks out?
Well, I'm going to go with a different guy because I've already chose Ignat, and man crush be damned. Nick Days, I feel like kind of already broke out a little bit last year. He kind of had that coming out when Kyle Bailey was out for a few games. So I'm going to go with Jaden Hunter, another P5 transfer from Georgia. Just anytime you have that kind of pedigree, you go to a Georgia top ranked SEC school, there's going to be some sort of physical ability gap there. And when you come to a CUSA school, we're going to expect that you might shine in our system once you kind of know the ropes and are established. He's been here. I expect he will be on the field and making plays. So Jaden Hunter is going to kind of be my dark horse to sneak in there and make some plays. I think he's going to be a tough guy to keep off the field.
Yeah, it's a solid pick, of course, but that's one of the guys I mentioned that is on the roster as a defensive lineman. So we'll see if he ultimately drops back and plays in the linebacking spot. And you're right. You talk about guys that come over from Power 5 schools. You expect there to be a certain level of ability and athleticism that's there that you may not find in your run-of-the-mill G5 or Conference USA linebacker. And you really don't have to look any farther to prove that true than over at the Herd. You look at a guy like Devontae Beckett that played at Virginia Tech, and he comes over and basically dominates, on the defensive side of the ball in Huntington and wins, a Defensive Player of the Year award and all that good stuff. So it's entirely possible. The blueprint's there. We've seen it happen on the other side of this rivalry, and there's nothing saying that one of these guys isn't the guy that can do it this year. Who's going to be the MVP of the unit once it's all said and done, Steve?
Man crush 23 Will Ignat.
It's funny every time. I don't know. It's just funny every time. Yeah,
it's true. It's true.
It's all up in the air again. Until somebody solidifies themselves as LB1, the leader of that linebacking core, anybody could be the MVP. So I've said this before in years past. When it comes to this unit right now, I'm Missouri, right? You're just going to have to show me. I can't really just pick a guy. I need to see it first. So what's the hot take for the 2021 linebacking unit from Western Kentucky?
It's going to be similar to the defensive line because, there's a lot of turnover there, a lot of unknown there. I think collectively between the D-line and the linebackers, I think we're going to hold our opponents to a similar rushing average that we held last year, which I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know what that number is. But I know that against the run, we were pretty good last year as far as holding people on a per rush average. And I think between the D-line and linebackers, guys that we have, the athletes on the field, maybe not necessarily, sacks, big tackles for loss, Those stats don't always necessarily accumulate. But I think if you're holding people to low yardage production, that really kind of counts just as much as those impact plays, the sacks and stuff. So I think the linebackers are going to be just as disruptive, just as solid, making plays, sure tackles. And that's kind of what we've heard out of fall camp is that a very clean tackling unit on the defensive side of the ball, which is what you want to hear, especially when you have so much turnover, so many new faces. Very clean tackling team. We're not slipping tackles and seeing plays develop and break that should have been ended at the line of scrimmage or behind it. So I think defensively we're going to be surprisingly sound and hold people to the minimum yards allowed per play.
I'm just going to go in a general kind of defensive wide hot take type thing here. And I'm going to say that, for the first time, it's only been 2 years, but for the first time since 2019, the leading tackler on the defense will be a linebacker. And by the way, that linebacker in 2019 was Kyle Bailey. So that just tells you, again, how big of a loss that it is that he's gone for 2021. First on the team in tackles 2019, third on the team in 2020. So I think that we're going to get back to seeing that. We're not going to have a safety or a defensive back lead the way in tackles for the toppers. I think the defensive line is going to cause enough game plan adjustment that we're going to see to where linebackers have the opportunity to make the lion's share of the tackles, and your leading tackler is going to be a linebacker. Let's get some final thoughts in here, Stephen, talking about defensive line and linebackers before we get the heck out of here for this week.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of have a mixed bag of expectation and returning people, kind of returning names. I mean, defensive line is solid. I mean, when you name 3 or 4 guys that kind of what to expect and what you're getting, then you're plugging some JUCO guys in there. You expect that unit to be solid. Then on the linebacking core, you just talked about, P5 type guys just everywhere. I think the defense, under Clayton White has just been solid for the last 3 years. Even though we've kind of changed gears, Clayton White moved on. I expect with some of those guys coming back, I think the defense is going to be fine. And I think it's going to start up front with those guys, the big bodies wreaking havoc in the backfield. Secondary might be a different story. We'll find out when we talk about those. But I think the D-line and linebackers are going to be just as productive and disruptive as what we're used to under Clayton White, but under Maurice Crumb's leadership. So I'm really excited about this group and the production we're going to see.
I get the feeling that as long as the linebackers just do their job, you'll be fine. We know that the defensive line is far above average, and they're gonna cause hell for a lot of offenses up and down the schedule, and they're gonna be very disruptive. So I feel like if the linebackers just do what they're supposed to do, this defense will ultimately be okay, and it will probably be a little bit better than okay. And you're right when we talk about the secondary, and we get into talking about being able to minimize chunk plays and stuff like that. That's a different animal. But as far as this unit is I don't know. They haven't made a name for themselves yet. So I feel like if they can just do their job and reap the benefit of what the defensive line is about to do, they'll ultimately be okay. And somebody will rise out of the group, or maybe 2 guys will rise out of the group to become, stud players. And the guys that we'll be talking about heading into the 2022 season, like, all right, this is the guy, we saw it last year and yada, yada, yada. This is just that year where somebody's got to do that. And then, we'll be able to sing praises for certain guys next year. Maybe it is Nick Days. Maybe it is Will Ignat. The stats aren't there to back up anybody being that guy. So now it's just do your job. Don't be the guy that is in the wrong place and lined up the wrong spot and covering the wrong man. Just do your job. You'll ultimately be fine. So look, we'll come back at you here later this week with defensive backs and special teams for the tops. We're going to round out position group breakdowns. And then, man, we are right up on it. It'll be season predictions and the week 1 preview. Man, it's getting close. Steve, what do you got before I let you take us out of here? We're getting close.
Yeah, I say, season's less than 2 weeks away, so it's go time. I mean, it's real close. We're ready. I can feel it. The game temperature is, you kind of feel those crisp mornings. You're getting, fall weather's here. It's not scorching hot, so it's football weather coming on us quick, and UT Martin coming real soon.
Speak for yourself. It was 93 degrees today at my house. There's no crisp. It was a brisk 88 this morning at 8 a.m. Standard
Top of Bay.
A standard Tampa morning here in August. But yeah, let's go ahead and get out of here, and we'll see you guys in a couple days later this week with the remainder of the position group breakdowns, the secondary, and the special team. Steve, takes out.
Go Tops.
Go Herd. It's the Moonshine Throwdown Podcast. Later.